about.
This is an NBC News special report. Decision 2020 update. Here's Lester Holt.
Good day, everyone. We're coming on the air with continuing special coverage of Decision 2020. 3 days after Election Day, we're closer than ever to knowing who will be elected president of the United States. It's been another day of high drama already as vote counting in Pennsylvania and Georgia have now given Joe Biden a narrow lead over Donald Trump in each of those states. A win in Pennsylvania, as you likely know, alone with its 20 electoral votes, would put Biden over the top. However, neither of those states has yet been called for Biden. We're awaiting a press conference from Philadelphia election officials at any moment. We'll bring that to you as soon as they get started. But right now, let's turn it over to Chuck Todd, NBC's political director and moderator of Meet the Press. Chuck.
Well, and what we're trying to figure out in Philly is there's approximately, we think, 20,000 more ballots that they need to process. We'll, I guess, find out the status of those. But it's been a slow a slow addition of these vote counts, because again, this is a tedious process when they're processing these vote by mail. These are all the folks who voted by mail. As you see, Joe Biden's statewide lead now is nearing 10,000 here. If you're wondering, the recount provision, if Joe Biden's lead exceeds sort of approximately 34,000, that would likely put him outside of that recount provision. Our math indicates that it will be close. But if things are going the way they're going, and these ballots continue to go in the direction that they've been, he should continue to add there. The question is how much. But like I said, we think there's about 20,000 more ballots coming out of Philadelphia. Joe Biden's actually been winning the vote by mail ballots by an even greater share than 81% there. We think there's another 20 max ballots, 20,000 ballots in these surrounding suburban counties. We know that there is approximately 30 to 35,000 ballots in Allegheny County that won't even get beginning the counting process there until 5 p.m. today. There was sort of a batch of early mail ballots that were, the negotiation was they're essentially, these were ballots that there was a printing error. They agreed that they wouldn't touch and fix the ballots until 5 o'clock on Friday after Election Day. So this is sort of a special batch. There'll be a whole bunch of election observers. In fact, there'll be some ballots where they're also dealing with 2,200 ballots that were mangled. You know, think of the dollar bill that you can't get in the vending machine type of thing. And they have to recreate ballots. Now, imagine all the observers, everybody's watching as you do that so that you can scan the ballot in. So there'll be some of that's got to happen there. We still think that at some point today, we should have enough data to get us to a situation where we can characterize this better. We think there's a greater than 90% chance that Joe Biden wins the state of Pennsylvania, but we're not at a 99.5% certainty rate here, which is why, and I've had plenty of people ask, why haven't you called Pennsylvania? The trend line is obvious. You know the votes that are out are vote by mail and all this, and it's like, yeah, well, we have standards for a reason. So and we're going to wait until we meet those standards. The other development, of course, that happened this morning was in Georgia, and question is how many ballots. Secretary of State thinks there's only about another 4,000 ballots to add to the vote totals. The folks in Gwinnett County say, hey, we have 4,000 on our own on those vote totals. There's a little bit of dispute of how many ballots there are left to count. And there's also potentially as many as 8,000 overseas and military ballots that are due. Any of them that arrive by 5 p.m. today get counted. If they don't count. So we don't expect all 8,000 military ballots to be in this count. Might be 3, might be 4, something like that. But for what it's worth, they've already announced there's going to be a recount. And if you're wondering, the recount doesn't even begin until November 20th. And the recount would likely take a week. So maybe it's done before Thanksgiving. Maybe it's done after Thanksgiving. I will say this. I don't think anybody wants, I don't say that. If Georgia is what we're waiting for to decide the presidency, then it becomes election month. It doesn't look like the math is going to indicate that. We've also been getting some new vote out of Arizona. We got a batch of 61,000 ballots earlier today out of Maricopa County. We were telling you last night that in order for Donald Trump to make up this deficit of Joe Biden in Arizona, he needed to win all remaining ballots with approximately 59% of the vote. This batch of 61,000, he only won about 52% of the vote, which means He only netted about 3,000. It lowered the difference there from about 46 to 43. Now, there is what we thought there were about 140 to 150,000 ballots remaining. There's some indication that there may be more than that. So we're trying to recheck how many ballots we think are out there. I'll show you our little system. This is on the high end, and there was some 226 remaining ballots. The question is, we thought it was lower to 140, 150. We're trying to figure out how many ballots are left before we can get to that. I'm not confident we get to a 99.5% certainty rate today, but we could. For what it's worth, we did call the Mark Kelly Senate race. The Senate race there, Martha McSally was the appointed incumbent senator. Mark Kelly has been leading. He was performing about 2 points better than Joe Biden, and that last batch put him mathematically into the win column there. And now let's go to Nevada, where we've gotten more Clark County ballots, approximately 50,000 of them. They broke heavily towards Joe Biden. He essentially has doubled the size of his lead. It's up to 20,000 ballots. And this is something that we also think we're pretty close to being able to see how close we are to our 99.5% certainty rate here on Nevada. So to summarize here, Pennsylvania and Nevada are in the realm of being characterized today that we may be able to have enough vote to figure out where that's going. And then a little less certain on Arizona today, and obviously Georgia. See you at Thanksgiving.
Right, and that Nevada vote you were looking at was coming primarily out of Clark County.
Right now, coming out of Clark County, and let's just look. Let's remind people of where we are and the importance of these states. Pennsylvania alone would give Joe Biden the 270 plus electoral votes that he needs, and that's the president's struggle here. He could win North Carolina, which we expect him to do. We're waiting on how many provisionals there will be here. If he wins the recount there, let's say he caught Joe Biden there, and let's say by some miracle something came through for him in Nevada, as you can see there, he could, and let's not forget our friends in Alaska where they're still counting the ballots there. He could win 5 of the 6 remaining uncalled states and still be short. So at the end of the day, this really is a one-state conversation right now, because if Joe Biden carries Pennsylvania, it's checkmate for the president. Given
the environment and the doubt that's being sown out there, is it better for Joe Biden that it becomes more than Pennsylvania?
It is. Look, yes, in short. I mean, the fact is Joe Biden he doesn't need Pennsylvania. Just Nevada and Arizona does it. If you take away Arizona and it's Nevada and Georgia, that does it, right? If he loses Nevada, fine. Arizona and Georgia does it, right? So here he is leading in Nevada, leading in Arizona, leading in Georgia, leading in Pennsylvania. And by the way, let me just give you a little bit of a snapshot of what happens if all leads stay as they are. And I'm going to show you a little electoral vote total here that'll look quite familiar to folks.
It looks familiar.
That is the
2016.
It's the 2016 number, believe it or not. And that right now, if all leads held, that would be the spread back to back, except this time with the blue side at 306.
All right, Chuck, thanks for updating us what the battlegrounds look like right now. We want to return to this Arizona issue right now. Gadi Schwartz is in Phoenix, and I know you're seeing more supporters of the president gathering outside as the votes are counted. How's things going?
Yeah, Lester, so far this is the biggest crowd that we've seen. And just to remind people, the crowd that you're seeing behind me, probably about 600, 700 strong, and it is in the parking lot of the Maricopa Election Center. So that building over there, that is where they are counting those votes. That's where those 70,000 votes came from. We're expecting another batch of about 60, 70,000 votes pretty soon. From what we've seen, it's somewhat negligible, these results, but we do see President Trump slowly closing the lead between Joe Biden. Joe Biden has been in the lead basically since the first results came back. But one of the things that we've seen that has been very, very interesting is, as we called the race for Mark Kelly, you compare the difference different numbers, and Mark Kelly's lead over Martha McSally was about 100,000 or more. And right now, Joe Biden's lead over President Trump is around 50,000, 40 to 50,000. So what you're seeing right there is some zigzagging, and that's what we've seen here in Arizona. Arizona's kind of known for it. You remember back in 2016, this was a place, Maricopa County, they elected President Trump, but they sent Joe Arpaio out of office. And so that was all in the same election. You sometimes see things go one way. You sometimes see people go the other way. She's saying, shame on Fox News. She's very mad that Fox News covered the election the way that they did and made that very early call for Joe Biden. A lot of people here are extremely frustrated at the way that the votes are being counted. In fact, just a little while ago, they were chanting, count every vote, count every vote. Then the votes haven't all been counted yet, and they have switched into chanting recount. That's the latest from here. Back to you.
All right, Gadi, thanks very much. I understand that press conference is getting underway right now in Philadelphia, or about to. Yes, officials there are giving an update. Let's listen.
Staff this operation. The Office of Innovation and Technology, the Managing Director's Office, Finance Department, our Police Department, Chief Administrative Office, and others have helped support the City Commissioners in preparing for this election for over a year. And there are hundreds of others, including many city employees, who helped on Election Day and by staffing this ballot counting operation for all the world to see. You are all too numerous to name, but please know that you have my thanks and the thanks of the people of this city. And most of all, I thank the people of Philadelphia. Earlier this week, Commissioner Dealy and I sent out an open letter to voters, urging patience and calm on Election Day and in the days that followed. You have shown it in spades. We ask that you stay calm and stay above the fray. You did exactly that. What we've seen on the streets outside this convention center was not anger or contention, but music, dancing, and celebration. As we predicted, the voters and residents of Philadelphia ensured that our city shined as an example of how to run an election correctly. So in the days ahead, please remember, this is not about a victory for a single candidate or a single political party. This is truly a victory for our democracy. That may sound cliche, but today it is oh so true. The votes will continue to be counted until every valid mail-in ballot, absentee ballot, and provisional ballot is counted. So while some, including the president, continue to spew baseless claims of fraud, claims for which his team has not produced one iota of evidence, what we have seen here in Philadelphia is democracy, pure and simple. Our founding fathers, who conceived this system just a 15-minute walk down the street, I know would be proud. 233 years after the Constitutional Convention, we stand at this convention center and proclaim the system still works, the people have spoken. And God willing, we will have a peaceful transition to power in January. And I'd like to take this moment now to introduce Commissioner Lisa Dealy, who's the chair of the Philadelphia City Commissions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I want to thank all of you and the public for your continued patience. Our goal has been to produce accurate results as quickly as possible, and we've continued to work toward that end. We've counted a total of 690,360 votes. Of that, 337,609 ballots were cast by mail, and 353,021 were cast at a polling place. This is by far the largest number of mail-in ballots in the city's history. I'm very proud of the work our staff did. They've been working around the clock since Tuesday and before. Here's what you can expect in the upcoming days. At some point this afternoon, we will report another updated mail-in ballot results. I expect it to be 2,000 to 3,000. After that, the remaining ballots generally fall into one of three categories.
Inventory is now available during the Rio Escondido Autumn in the Hill Country Land Sale. Get your new cottage shell and 10-plus acres for only $149.9 with an ideal centralized location and upscale amenities.
We can also tell you that it may take several days to complete the reporting of that. And as you know, election results are not officially certified until 20 days after the election. Thank you again. Thank you to the citizens of Philadelphia. And now I would like to invite Commissioner Omar Sabir to the podium. Afterward.
Good afternoon. I'd like to thank the County Board of Election staff. I would like to thank the taxpaying citizens of Philadelphia and across America. I think it's safe to say that democracy has won. Democracy is beautiful. We saw the statue of Octavius Cotto right on City Hall, where he died so that Americans can have access to the democratic process. And as we stand here today in 2020, people still have access to democracy. And it's a beautiful thing, but we still want everyone to exert patience, ignore a lot of the noise that's going on, allow us to complete the counting process. And again, I'd like to thank everyone. I would also like to thank my beautiful wife at home with my 6 children. While I'm down here doing all of the counting, I'd like to say, hi, wife, I love you and thank you. And right now, I'd like to bring on our council president, Darrell Clarke, who's a friend, who's a mentor, and a true leader of Philadelphia.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good afternoon, everyone. So, to say this was a tumultuous year would be the understatement of the year. We in the city of Philadelphia and across the nation have gone through some very, very challenging times. But in spite of that all, democracy works. Democracy works. I want to thank the commissioners who were given a short time frame to transition from the traditional in-person voting that Philadelphians are known for to having a mail-in ballot system, to have multiple options. And guys, I just want to say you did a great job. You did a great job. But in all due respect to you guys, I want to thank the people that worked. Every time you went by Broad Street or you went by City Hall or you went by Delaware and Spring Garden, the lights were on because we had literally hundreds of hard-working individuals in there making sure that this process works. So I just want to thank everybody. I want to particularly thank the citizens of our city who understood the need to participate at record numbers to a degree. I want to thank the country for understanding the need to have a reasonable process that allows the citizens to speak. So to everyone involved, and particularly these individuals here, the mayor, the commissioners, thank you all, and thank you for giving us an opportunity to allow democracy to work.
We'll continue to monitor that news conference going on in Philadelphia. They're obviously feeling good about what they've done so far. We hear another 2,000 to 3,000 ballots they expect to count today. And they're obviously a little bit stung about some of the accusations of malfeasance that have been leveled by the Trump campaign. Let me bring in Chuck and Kate Snow as well. I get that right. 2,000 to 3,000 is what she said.
That's what I heard. Yep.
And then 40,000 others, which would include provisional ballots.
Right, provisional ballots, also military overseas ballots, and any ballot that has some reason for review, she said, are in that 40,000 bucket that they won't get to for several days, she said.
Those are the type of ballots that you almost have to deal with individually, you know, because some of them, why would there be a provisional ballot? Let me give you an easy example. You got your mail, you got your mail-in ballot, and then maybe you thought, I'm not going to put it in the mail. You were told if you brought your mail ballot in, you turned it in, then you could vote, no problem. If you said, hey, I requested a mail ballot, but I don't have it, then they said you have to fill out a provisional ballot, and they just got to double check to make sure you didn't try to double vote. I mean, that is
one of the safeguards.
Yes.
It's one of the safeguards, and many of these, you know, many of these states have individual barcodes, so that literally you're a barcode, and they'll know immediately. They'll be able to find out pretty fast whether you essentially checked in twice.
All right,
But it takes time.
But that takes time. You have to individually deal with it.
2,000 to 3,000 votes. How have the Philadelphia votes been breaking?
Right here, I'll show you in Philly right now. They've been breaking on the vote by mail. Been breaking greater than what he called here. So you know, let's if it's 2,000 to 3,000, you know, that means he's going to net anywhere from 1,000 to 1,200 votes to his lead here. We do. It's interesting. We don't, and so in those other 40,000, we don't know how many of them end up being actual ballots. Let's say half of them are tossed. That's another 20, so that's a long way to go there. The suburbs, our estimates are another 15 to 20,000 ballots. But honestly, we had this estimate that it was 20,000 in Philadelphia. Well, it turned out it's 2,000 to 3,000 plus this 40. I'm guessing somebody estimated that there'll be 20,000 more when all is said and done, but they were making their own sort of shorthand estimate on how many of those 40,000 provisionals would actually get counted. The point is this. The question is, will Joe Biden be able to get a lead that's outside of the recount provision, 0.5%? I don't know if that happens today, but the math is working in his favor. The math is not working in the president's favor. There is a big batch of ballots in Allegheny County that they won't even begin to count until 5 p.m. today. Allegheny in general was a good county for Biden, not like Philadelphia, but pretty good, 59% of the vote essentially. And on the vote by mail, he's been winning greater. And these 30,000 ballots are mail-in ballots. There actually were mail-in ballots that were printed in error, and they had to create a settlement. And these are ballots that they'll then inspect and count starting at 5 p.m. today. It was part of a sort of a settlement after a court case there brought by 2 local candidates. So that's another large chunk. And then we're starting to run out of ballots to count. And so we're getting close on our math, but we're not there yet.
All right, Chuck, let's find out a little bit more about that situation in Allegheny County. We'll go to Stephanie Gosk, who's in Philadelphia. What can you tell us about those ballots and that counting?
Sure, Lester. It does get a little complicated, but let me take you back to the weeks and months before the election took place. Allegheny County sent out these 29,000 mail-in ballots, but there was a printing mistake. And then they said, oh, wait, we have to reprint these and send them back out. Well, these 2 candidates, congressional candidates, GOP members, said, hang on a second, we're going to sue you for how you handled all this. They went to court, and they had to settle on how they were going to deal with it moving forward. And the settlement basically said, okay, you can take these ballots when they come in, these mail-in ballots, but you have to put them aside because they have to be treated differently. And you can't start counting them until 5 o'clock tonight. And the reason that they have to be treated differently is also this question of you don't want people double voting. Like, how can they ensure that the person who received this ballot didn't vote on the old ballot or whatever it might be? They have to check voter rolls. So that's why that's going to happen later, and it's also going to be slower. It's going to be slower than just these regular mail-in ballots. So if it really comes down to that count out in Allegheny County, it's going to be a couple more days at least before you get a good read of what those mail-in ballots are going to show us.
All right, Stephanie Gosk, thank you for walking us through that. I want to go to Chris Jansing now. She's in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, where we're seeing some of the passions of this uncertainty playing out there behind you. Chris?
Yeah, we have been seeing this over the course of the last couple of days. There have been rallies on both sides. These happen to be what they call the Stop the Steal. They are sort of promulgating what the president has been saying, which has been absolutely disproved, that somehow if you count a vote after Election Day, that it's fraudulent. Of course, that's not the case. They're much quieter than they have been. And then every afternoon, we've been seeing the folks on the opposite side who say just let the count continue. It does tell you a little bit, though, about the emotions that are still going on here. And I can tell you from my conversations with Democratic officials this morning who had been telling me for the last 24 hours, you wait, Joe Biden is going to go ahead in the vote count sometime in the early morning hours, that there wasn't a whole lot of sense of celebration. There was more of a sense of let's sit back, let's be calm, let's wait for this process to play out, which is just what we heard at that press conference, although there has been some pretty strong criticism of what the president has said and done, and some of the folks around the president have said and done. But bottom line is the folks I'm talking to still believe, and I just was in touch with them this morning, who have given me good information all along. They say they still think that Joe Biden can win this state by 100,000 votes, but it's not happening as quickly as they thought it might, Lester.
All right, Chris Jansing and Harrisburg with the view from there. Thank you. I want to go to Hallie Jackson now at the White House. Hallie, what are we hearing from President Trump's team today? They're obviously looking at the same numbers all of us are.
Yeah. listen, Lester, it is a public posture of defiance, but behind the scenes, I can tell you, based on the reporting from my conversations with sources and the rest of our team's conversations as well, there is a grim understanding that is dawning of the reality of this race, that it seems to be slipping from the president's fingers, frankly, based on the numbers that we are seeing. I can tell you that people in and around the campaign are feeling deflated. Campaign staffers largely reporting to campaign headquarters in Virginia today, but frankly, without much to do, hitting refresh on the computer to see where these results are, much the same way that members of the media are on those big boards and on those maps looking as returns roll in. There is no discussion, we are told, of the president thinking about conceding this race at any point, at least not right now, with one person telling me that he is going to fight until the very last seconds. And that is the posture from the president, a fighting posture. But at the same time, there is real frustration from some allies and advisors of the president's that there is no field marshal, no field general, if you will, who is marshaling the Trump troops to be able to mount both a PR, a messaging strategy here, and a legal strategy as well. Because right now, it seems as though the path from the Trump campaign, if it's not going to go through the Electoral College, depending on how Pennsylvania goes, they're hoping it goes through the courts. That is why you are continuing to see these baseless claims of fraud being pushed by the Trump campaign, claims for which there is no evidence right now, no reports of fraud widespread, no reports of any systemic issues with the election. But right now, that is the focus publicly that the campaign is coalescing around. We should note that it's not just that the Trump team has presented no evidence to members of the media, right, or to these various states. There is no evidence in the courts, in the places where this legal battle is being pushed, with lawsuits being dismissed in Georgia and Michigan for that very reason, that the judges there said there's no evidence to back up the claim from the Trump campaign that anybody is breaking the law. But that seems to be what they have left at this point, as the path simply gets narrower and narrower. At some point, Lester, I have been told over the last 36, 48 hours that the president has been extremely engaged in the vote count. He's been very engaged in where these tallies are. But at some point, there are some hard truths that will have to be delivered to the president. And I spoke with one person close to the White House who said rather sarcastically, nobody right now is willing to tell King Lear the truth about how this race is going. The president, of course, is watching the same numbers we are. We do not have an expectation that we will see him in the coming hours, at least not in the immediate afternoon, Lester. The White House press secretary says the discussions are still happening with no decision about whether the president plans to speak publicly. If he were to, it wouldn't be until at least after 2 o'clock in the afternoon, based on what we have heard from the White House here already today, Lester.
All right. Thanks for the view there from Hallie. Clearly, this race is still on. But Chuck, very quickly, check me. Has there been an instance in the modern era where a candidate who was clearly on the losing side of the numbers refused to accept and concede? I'm putting you on the spot.
Al Gore made a call and then reversed it.
Look, there's plenty of Georgia Republicans who believe Stacey Abrams never conceded in the 2018 Senate gubernatorial race. She certainly stood down, and the question is semantics. I don't think she's ever accepted that she lost that race.
Presidential election?
But not in a in a presidential, no. I mean, I think Herbert Hoover didn't speak to FDR when they rode down to the Capitol. Yeah. I think and Harry Truman and Dwight Eisenhower might not have spoken. I wish we had Beschloss here right now.
I hate to put you on the spot. It just dawned on me when she talked about that, and it was like, well, is that
I'm thinking back to 2000 and Al Gore making the phone call to George W. Bush and saying, I concede, and then calling back and saying, oops, no, I don't. I'm pulling it back. Yeah. And then how many weeks?
But he
3
was
weeks?
watching, the numbers.
Well, and then he conceded in the night of the Supreme Court.
That's right.
The day after.
Let me bring joining in the conversation now, former Democratic Missouri Senator Claire McCaskill and conservative columnist and editor of National Review Rich Lowry. Both are NBC News political contributors. And Claire, I'll start with you. This idea that if the numbers we're seeing and break one way or the other, or let's say they break for Joe Biden and Donald Trump does not concede, we've never been there. What does that put into play?
Well, I think Team Biden just moves forward behaving like a president-elect would and ignores the behavior that may be coming from the Oval Office in the coming weeks. You know, here's the thing. The credibility of this race is important. And I think one of the things that we need to continually point out is that two of these states the elections are run by Republicans, both in Nevada and in Georgia. Those are Republican secretaries of state. They are the officials responsible for the administration of the election and making sure that there is no fraud, making sure that everything is done by the book. So winning those two states is really important for the credibility of the results. I know he doesn't need them if we get Pennsylvania, but it still adds a certain air of credibility that the Republicans in those states say there's no fraud.
Yeah, Rich, have you played the what-if game here? If the numbers just go against the president, Joe Biden reaches 270, and the president does not concede or continues to go on the offense, what that looks like and what that means for the Republic?
Well, I don't think he's ever going to say, I lost fair and square. He'll just never say it. And he's not going away. You know, when he's most presidents, after they lose or they've served 2 terms, there's at least a time when you don't hear from them for a while when they're out of office. That is not going to apply here, obviously, and I think he very well may be thinking of running in 2024, and it'll help him to run as a martyr of an allegedly stolen election.
Rich, I've got to cut you off just for a second. We're going to go to Las Vegas. Clark County election officials holding a news conference now.
To use the microphones. If you're not using the microphone, I'm going to ask you to get to the microphone to ask the question. Now, starting off, I'd like to put some information out for voters to help them in
moved up his total slightly.
Joseph Glorios speaking, and for some reason we're having more audio problems coming out of there, but we've been watching the numbers in Nevada beginning to widen or break more.
Well, actually, we just got some.
You got new numbers?
Yes, Lehigh County, Allentown.
Pennsylvania.
Oh, this is Pennsylvania. Okay.
Pennsylvania, basically about another 6,000 votes. They broke 2-1 for Biden, and you can see his share went up another 0.1%.
And the difference is now 12,000.
12.3. So it's. We told you there are, of all the suburban counties, there are 2,000 to 3,000 ballots in each one of them that we expect throughout the afternoon.
Yeah, this notion, though, that I think was Kristen Halley was reporting that the I'm forgetting who said it now, that there could be 100,000 of...
Chris Jansen.
Chris Jansen,
the Biden people still think they're going to win by 100,000 votes. Look, maybe when all the provisionals are done, and I'm not going to rule that out, that math, but, you know, there's been this happy talk. Philadelphia did not come in quite as big as the Biden folks thought it was going to. It came in, he got a margin much closer to what Hillary Clinton got, which was about 40 to 50,000 less out of Philadelphia County net than what Barack Obama got in 2012. So, you know, I'll be honest, I think some of these Democratic estimates we're all a little bullish. Because the reality has come in. Yes, they have all the ballots have broken big for Biden. There's just not been as many of them left that they thought.
All right, I'm going to try to re-energize the brain cells. In the meantime, we'll go back to Nevada, Clark County. Joseph Gloria.
You only saw 30,000 instead of the 51. However, the universe of ballots that I communicated yesterday is still accurate. The only thing you need to do is take it down approximately 20,500 from the 51 to the 30,000. But the 63,000 ballots that I reported yesterday are in the system in various stages. So those will still expected to be reported. Beginning today, we will begin to report our results 2 times a day. So you've already seen the update for this morning. In the afternoon, we will be putting up a fresh report on the mail ballots that have been read into the system sometime before 4 o'clock. We're required to report to the Secretary of State first. Once they've indicated to us that they've received it and it's verified, we'll be able to post on our end. So rather than giving you a specific time, I'll just tell you that it'll be sometime before 4 p.m. Now, one more time, I'd like to go through the ballots that are separate from that universe that I reported. We still have the provisional ballots. All of our laptops from Election Day have been downloaded, so all of that information is available to my staff. Today, we will start in earnest reviewing provisional ballots. There are 60,000 of those to go through in various categories. Now, I want to remind you that we have to coordinate with the Secretary of State because, again, we are not a top-down registration state. We work from the bottom up, so all 17 counties have to report to the Secretary. They still have not given me the instructions. I know that they're on the way, but at some point they'll let us know when to send our report up, and that will be the tool that they use to match against the other 16 counties in Nevada to make sure that nobody's duplicated a vote in one county to the next, because we want to prevent that. Once we do that, we can begin to release the provisional ballots into count. However, that won't happen until the Secretary of State verifies that report. A reminder that the ID required voters, their deadline is today at 5 p.m. For those who were required to provide an ID, that has to be sent to us by 5 p.m. today. We have a cure line available at 702-455-6552, where we have staff available to assist those individuals with getting that into us. The U.S. mail update for this morning. We received 241 ballots in today's mail that will be added to that number that I'm calling my universe of ballots to be counted. It's looking pretty clear that the number of ballots is going to continue to go down. However, I wanted to ensure the general public, we have been working very close with our regional supervisor at the U.S. Postal Service, and they're doing an excellent job of reviewing all of the post stations here in Clark County. In fact, they have them sweeping regularly more than once on a daily basis, and if they identify anything that needs to be delivered to the office, they get it to our office within 3 to 4 hours. It doesn't even go to the process of having it set up for us to pick up. They're physically delivering those. So we appreciate their effort. They're making sure, just as we are, that we're counting every ballot that's eligible to be counted. So our thanks to the U.S. Postal Service locally. The cure process is another group of ballots that we need to process. They have until Thursday, the 12th of November, to cure that. My staff will not leave this facility until we've counted all of those ballots that have been identified as curable. AB 4 was very clear in the legislative special session that we have to have all ballots counted by November 12th. And with that, I'll open it up for questions. Remember, you need to be at the mic. Good morning, right there.
Joseph Glorio, the registrar in Clark County, Nevada, the most populous county in Nevada, giving a bit more of a breakdown. Does that offer a little more clarity, Chuck?
A little, being honest.
We're going to report twice a day.
A little. We got twice a day. Look, I said we're close. The president actually just netted a little bit out of Carson City. We just got a mini report out of there, too. But he only netted about 1,000 votes, so it should have, curious to see. And so Joe Biden's lead is sitting at 20,000, but we got out of here, the president. This is a county where the capital is. By the way, as a kid, I always thought, why did Johnny Carson get a catalog? I was like 3 or 4, but I now get it. Just a little confession there. So he netted about I think 1,000 votes out of there, but still, we're pretty close here. That next batch that he's promising to come out at this point. We have already changed, we've technically changed how we've characterized Nevada. It was earlier today, based on that, we went from too close to call on its own to too close to call Joe Biden leading. And so the next batch is likely to be the most definitive batch that we review yet.
And that's the one I think he said
it's going to come at
4 p.m., 7 p.m. Eastern time. So we'll, of course, watch for that. Also keeping our eye on Pennsylvania, I want to bring in Democratic Senator from Pennsylvania, Bob Casey. Senator, good to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks.
I don't know if you were able to hear the briefing just a short time ago in Philadelphia on the count there, but they seem to be making progress. What's your assessment as to where your state is and when we'll have some resolution?
Well, thanks, Lester. Obviously, Joe Biden's ahead and right around 10,000, I guess it is. I haven't been able to look the last number of minutes, but he's ahead. I think by in the next day or so, when we have a more complete count, there'll be a number that probably is in the double-figure thousands. But ultimately, the best assessment that I've seen is that it'll be 100,000 vote margin. When I'd say ultimately, I mean when there's an official count that is the predicate for certification.
So,
but that's going to probably take 2 weeks to have that completed, because you've got, according to the York Daily Record, 92,500 provisional ballots in the state. So that's a big number.
We've watched in some of our reporting from Pennsylvania, there are supporters of the president who are out raising concerns about malfeasance in terms of the election count. Are you worried that we could see Joe Biden, cross over the 270 finish line and become perhaps the next president? Are you worried, though, about the lingering aftertaste of this if the president continues to push this idea that something's amiss?
Well, look, the president's been engaged in this kind of conduct and making these kinds of statements for a long time. He lies all the time. He has asked, has continually raised questions about mail-in ballots in our system of voting. He's kind of a one-man underminer of democracy, and when he does that, he hurts our national security. However, despite all that, despite intimidation tactics and everything the president said and did the last number of months, people voted in record numbers. Joe Biden's going to be the president of the United States because he will have won the Electoral College. And at some point, Lester, the Constitution marches forward, and the president's got to decide whether he stands in front of the Constitution and gets steamrolled by it, or whether he accepts the will of the people. That's his decision, but he's not going to prevail.
All right. Senator Bob Casey, great to have you on. Thank you for your time.
Thanks.
Kristen Welker is at Joe Biden headquarters in Wilmington, Delaware. What's the situation there right now, Kristen?
Well, Lester, campaign officials telling me they are elated and increasingly confident that Joe Biden will, in fact, prevail in this race. We are told that there has really been a celebratory atmosphere throughout the day. In fact, in the morning call with campaign officials, one top official said, "We did it." Now, there are a number of those close to the vice president within the campaign are saying, let's not get too excited until we have the final call. And in fact, the vice president himself, we are told, watching this very patiently, and he sort of has the perspective that he has wanted to and tried to run for president over the past 30-some years, so what is waiting another few hours? The Biden campaign striking a quite defiant note, though, as it relates to what you were just talking about with Senator Casey and what you all have been talking about there at the set. The fact that President Trump is signaling that he is not going to concede, at least he's not going to do it easily. Here's what one Biden official said on the record. This is from Andrew Bates, who's the Biden campaign spokesperson. Quote, "As we said on July 19th, the American people will decide this election, and the United States government is perfectly capable of escorting trespassers out of the White House." So that gives you a sense of how they are approaching what we are hearing from President Trump. And I can tell you inside Biden world, there is some concern, but it's not going to prevent the vice president, if and when there is a call, from addressing the nation. That is something that could happen in prime time, I'm told. And let me just set the scene here for you. We are here at the convention center where Biden spoke Tuesday into Wednesday, and I can tell you that there have been signs of life over the past 24 hours. There have been mic checks that have been going on, tinkering with the stage going on, and now more cars, in fact. Lester, as you know, the drive-in rally has been a real signature for the Biden campaign, so now more cars in the parking lot. So it feels like they are preparing for something to happen. We are also told just moments ago that Senator Harris, if and when the vice president speaks, will speak as well. She, of course, will make history if this race is called for the Biden ticket, because she would be the first black female vice president-elect. So they are preparing for something big here, and they continue to be defiant in the face of the president trying to claim that there has been voter fraud. But again, stressing that Vice President Biden has been very clear. He believes every vote needs to be counted, and he doesn't want to celebrate until there is a conclusion to to this race, Lester.
All right, Kristen, thank you. We're going to go back to Nevada now, where officials just said they have 63,000 ballots yet to be counted. NBC's Jacob Soboroff was at that Clark County press conference. What more can you tell us about what they're expecting in Nevada?
Hey, Lester. So the press conference is ongoing right now. Same gentleman we heard from yesterday, Joe Gloria, who yesterday had told us we were going to have 51,000 ballots today, released today. And this morning, there was a little confusion because there were only around 30,000 ballots that were released in that updated total that increased Joe Biden's lead here in the state to, I believe, around 21,000. Well, turns out that was an erroneous number that was given out by the the registrar here yesterday. That will be the total number for this morning, the 30,000 ballots. There are still overall 63,000 outstanding. The change here today is that we will get a second report. So far during this process, they've only reported one new ballot dump, for lack of a better term, a day. We're going to get a second one today before 4 o'clock local time, 7 p.m. On the East Coast. And again, there has been some criticism here that for a state that is so consequential, things have been moving relatively slowly. And if I can, just like we did yesterday, Lester, I just want to show you that in the area where the ballot scanner machines are right now, and they are those white things, they look kind of like big printers. Over there, there's another one. These are election observers in the foreground here. Hi, how are you? It doesn't appear that they're actually doing any scanning of the ballots right now. So I don't know if it's a volume issue, a processing issue, that they're not able to go as fast as they would like to. But the reality is, with all of these outstanding ballots, and I'm talking about the mail-in ballots, not even the provisional ballots, that goes beyond the 63,000 number. There are still a lot of ballots to count here because of a staff error. We were told we were going to get 51,000 this morning. It turns out we only ended up getting in the 30,000 neighborhood. But Joe Gloria, the registrar, is continuing his briefing right now, and we hope to continue to get some more information. And we know at least by 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, we'll have a second round of new data coming out of here in Clark County, where Nevada is.
All right, Jacob, thanks for walking us through all that. John Ralston's been covering Nevada politics for a very long time, lately for the Nevada Independent. He joins us now. John, what's your understanding of the confusion there between that 51,000 versus 30,000?
Well, my understanding, Lester, is, and I don't want to get too much in the weeds here, is there's essentially a difference between ballots and cards. Some ballots are longer than others, and they erroneously gave out a number of how many cards there were and not ballots. I have to tell you, as I've been saying here all week, I have great respect for Joe Gloria and the people who run these elections here, but there's clearly been just bad communications, and it allowed the Republicans to raise questions and allowed us in the media to say what the heck is going on. But it looks like they fixed everything now, and I'm glad they're going to be doing 2 reports a day, Lester. But the big news, of course, is what those 30,000 ballots showed, which is what I've been saying, as you know, Lester, that the Democrats won the mail consistently by 2-1 in Clark County. Most of the ballots that are left are in Clark County. Biden's lead has essentially doubled today. The mail ballots essentially showed 2-1 today. They showed the same thing yesterday. And despite what Chuck Tentative Todd is saying, Nevada is over.
Hey, buddy.
You deserve a response.
Look, man, we're not at that 99.5. And, at the end of the day, with a lot of scrutiny that we're all under these days, John, I think you know the cautious nature. And I really think, frankly, we've seen this with all of the folks that not just run election desks, but I'm talking about the folks counting the ballots. There's an extra methodical, deliberate nature. Tell me what's going on in Reno. Where there's just not much left out of Washoe County?
Yeah, there's a few hundred ballots that came out today, Chuck, that were updated in that total, and Biden won by a little bit. And you know Nevada as well as anyone who doesn't live here, Chuck. Washoe has been the key in the last few elections here, in the sense that it used to be a Republican county, but now the Democrats are consistently winning here. Hillary Clinton won by about 2,700 votes. Biden has even a bigger lead, as you can see right there. And both Governor Sisolak and Senator Rosen, who were supposedly in very tight races last cycle. Both won Washoe County, and that extended their margin. So there's not enough votes left in Washoe to really move the needle that much. Not enough left in the rurals either, Chuck. And so all those votes that are left are in Clark County. There's no reason to believe that Biden isn't going to win the rest of those mail ballots by close to 2-1. And then there's about 60,000 or so, I think, provisional ballots, most of which probably will count. These are same-day registrants who got provisional ballots. That was a new law that was passed. The same-day registration ballots in Clark County before now have been pretty even. The Republicans have done a pretty good job, but they have to do much better than even among those. So unless there's something really anomalous going on, there's no way that Trump does anything but lose votes here from now on.
Hey, John, look, I know when all is said and done, it looks like the margin for Joe Biden is going to look not that dissimilar to what Hillary Clinton got. What'd you learn over the last 4 years? What changed and what didn't?
Well, you know, it's interesting because not a lot really has changed. And you just said it yourself, Chuck. It looks like, again, if the progression continues, that Joe Biden will win the state by about the same margin as Hillary Clinton, about 2.5 percentage points. Now, the Republicans have been doing this since 2008. They've been trying to, figure out how to unlock the Clark County key, which has been everything for the Democrats. As you know, early voting here is usually 2/3 of the vote. The Democrats build up a huge bank of votes, and there's not enough votes left on Election Day. The Republicans thought they had a plan this time that was going to pay off, but it was, especially with what the president and his campaign have been doing, it was reliant on them being slightly ahead on election night. That did not happen. That's when they knew or believed that they had lost the state. You know, Chuck, we're going to have to wait to the exit polls to see if the Latino vote here was down this time, what else happened. But really, not much has changed.
No, the one thing that jumped out in the exit poll, and I'm curious of what you think a Biden administration ought to take away from him when I think about Nevada. And Nevada was one of the few battleground states that said, hey, we'd like to prioritize restarting the economy over containing the virus. Only Ohio was the only other battleground state that I think chose economy over the virus, which to me actually made a lot of sense. What should a Biden, if it indeed is a Biden White House, how should a Biden White House think about this balance that Nevada voters seem to be concerned about?
You know, Chuck, the way you just framed that, and you see those polling results up there, it's the key question for Nevada. The Republicans tried to change that perception here by essentially saying, look, they didn't do what you just said. The governor, who was a Democrat, didn't restart the economy. Steve Sisolak essentially forced the casinos to shut down really early because the coronavirus was so bad here. And that was devastating to the economy because after the casinos, Chuck, there ain't much here when it comes to the economy. And so that was devastating. And so the Republicans jumped on that. They tried to substitute Sisolak for Biden on the ballot, essentially saying, if you don't like what the lockdown did to the economy, then vote against Joe Biden and as a proxy for Steve Sisolak. We don't know if that worked, but it was a pretty smart strategy, if you ask me, Chuck. But it's much more nuanced than that, right? Things have been opening up here for quite some time. But there's a lot of people out of work, Chuck, and the unemployment system here has been dysfunctional, so there's a lot of anger. How much that played into this? Again, we have some exit polling data. I want to wait a little bit longer to see how that out.
All right, gentlemen. Thank you, John. Hallie Jackson at the White House right now. Hallie, you've got some new information.
Well, I want to answer some of the questions, Lester, that you and the panelists have been talking about here regarding the idea of where President Trump's head is at as we look at this race and where things stand currently. And there was this question, right, of if it continues to move in the direction that it's headed in Pennsylvania, and again, NBC News has not called this race. It is still obviously still very active. Would the president concede this? Let me just make a couple of points here. Remember, conceding, that is not a statutory or constitutional mandate. That is a tradition. It is not a requirement by law, Lester. So the one thing we know about this president, he does not hold tradition in high regard in many instances. So there is no indication that he would do so, at least until, according to our sources, after the recounts, the canvassing, the certifications have been completed. The latest deadline for that, I believe, in the 5 states that are still outstanding is December 1st. And I think that's the Wisconsin certification. So there's sort of that piece piece of things at play here. But I also want to point to, if past is precedent, right, and if the president's past actions provide a roadmap of where he goes from here, I want to flash you back to what was happening at the end of 2016 and early 2017. After Donald Trump had already locked up the Electoral College, he was already president-elect, he was inaugurated, he was president, he still insisted that the popular vote count was not valid, making back then even fraudulent claims of voter irregularity, going so far as to create, do you remember this? The Voter Commission, a presidential commission on election integrity. It ultimately found nothing untoward. It disbanded, I think, in 2018. But even as recently as last year, Chuck, the president was still telling you in that interview you conducted with Meet the Press that he felt like there was still concerns or that it was not accurate, the popular vote count. And I think that speaks to the president's ability to hold on to what he sees as something unfair, his sort of aggrieved sense of things. And so I don't think there is any indication that that is changing in the next couple of months, if in fact this moves in that direction.
Let me take you back. You went back to take you back earlier that year. The Iowa caucuses. The first time Donald Trump ever faced any set of voters were the Iowa caucuses. He lost. And I just went back to remind, I know what my memory was, but I just went back to all the headlines were when the Donald Trump side, Donald Trump claims Ted Cruz stole Iowa caucuses with calls. So this is there is a pattern here. When he doesn't, and in fact, I think he lost the Wisconsin primary, also was a big moment. And again, he accused, because everybody piled on him and everybody sort of rallied around him. So he has never accepted any loss as legitimate. He didn't accept the Iowa caucuses as legitimate. He didn't accept, I believe, was it the Wisconsin primary, Indiana primary? My memory is a little foggy right now. He didn't accept the popular vote, as Hallie pointed out. And so history says he's not going to accept this no matter what it is.
There's been a video that's been going viral on social media. I think it was last night. Hillary Clinton in one of the debates making this point to the president back in 2016 when they were debating, saying, you're the person that has, she repeated several instances of the president sticking to his ground.
What's worth noting is that we're talking about it.
Well, and as Rich Lowry, I thought, pointed out really well, he said he quoted his own column from like 4 years, like, Donald Trump's pattern is, Donald Trump admitted, yes, I whine sometimes. I whine till I win, was the quote, I think, that Rich Lowry was paraphrasing there. Donald Trump's entire career, he has found success basically denying reality.
Well, Hallie, what about that?
Bent the will sometimes of an alternative reality into his reality.
But Hallie, if you're still with us, I mean, we're looking at these Pennsylvania numbers. As you know, we have not called them, but a lot of folks may see the handwriting on the wall. How does the Trump campaign see a path? All right, so you complained about illegal voting. Do they honestly see a way to figure out a win that defies whatever that ultimate electoral vote number is?
I will tell you, Lester, based on my conversations over the past, few hours since the Pennsylvania numbers started coming in increasingly for Joe Biden this morning, I cannot confidently stand here and say that the campaign overall honestly, truly sees a path right now in Pennsylvania based on the the ballot numbers that are coming in. What I will say is that I do think that they are gearing up for this legal fight, this legal strategy moving forward, specifically in Pennsylvania, and specifically related to the case that is already in front of the Supreme Court regarding late arriving mail-in ballots. That is where a lot of the focus is right now, because if they're not going to get there based on the count as it stands now, they're hoping to get there based on the courts. But I will say there is real consternation and real frustration and concern that legal strategy is frankly a bit of a mess at the moment. There are those in the president's orbit who are allies, advisors, who are very concerned that there is not clear leadership on that front, that there is not somebody who is acting like, the Ted Olson, if you will, back in 2000 in Florida to try to mount a concerted, clear legal effort on behalf of the Trump campaign. Partly the framing of that, right, to compare what's happening in Pennsylvania to what's happening in Florida is intended to give the Trump campaign an air of legitimacy that doesn't seem to exist based on the legal challenges they've put forward so far, with judges dismissing cases that have already been filed because there's just not evidence to back up what the Trump campaign is saying. I'll also note that, Lester, you and I were talking, 24 hours ago about the lawsuit being threatened to be filed in Nevada. That actually hasn't materialized yet, right? That has not been formally filed by the Trump campaign. These are threats that we are seeing. There is that threat for the Wisconsin recount and others, But at this point, not clear how that legal strategy moves forward for President Trump.
All right, Hallie, thanks. And you kind of teed us up to where we want to go next. Let's take a closer look at the legal questions surrounding this election now with Justice correspondent Pete Williams and Ned Foley, an expert in constitutional law and the director of the election law program at Ohio State University. First to you, Pete. What is the status of that Pennsylvania suit about late arriving ballots?
So I will admit that Professor Foley and I talk about 25 times a day, probably more than he would like to answer my phone calls. But as I see it, there are basically only two kinds of lawsuits currently active that could actually affect the vote total. Now, the first one is the one that Hallie was just talking about, the lawsuit in the Supreme Court challenging the state Supreme Court's decision to extend the deadline for mail ballots until Friday. How much of a difference might that make? We can't say until we know how many mail ballots actually came in between 8 o'clock on Tuesday night and Friday at 5 p.m. So that could be important, maybe not. We'll see how many votes there are. The question is, was the state Supreme Court able to do that to extend the deadline, or can that be only done by the legislature? That's the legal question. The other kind of lawsuit that could affect the vote total is in state court in Pennsylvania. And here's the issue. In some counties, at least two counties that we know of, Montgomery County and Northampton County, the officials gave mail voters a chance to come in and fix their ballots if they had a problem with them. If they left off a date, there was some technical problem, they could fix the ballot or cast a provisional ballot. The Republicans say you can't do that under state law. State law doesn't allow that. The Democrats say, well, state law doesn't specifically allow it, but it doesn't specifically prohibit it either. So that's a legal question for the state courts in Pennsylvania to decide. It does seem to me that that lawsuit, while the Supreme Court lawsuit could look back at the votes that were cast in that extended period, these state court lawsuits are only forward-looking. If the courts say, yep, you're right, you can't let people cast a provisional ballot, they would have to stop counting any ballots that they knew of were in that category. But they'll undoubtedly cast a lot of ballots already, and you can't go back and now try to fish them out and figure out which ones they were or who they voted for. And then in Nevada, that's the only other state where there's any active litigation right now, and it's a lawsuit filed by two candidates for Congress who say that in Clark County they should stop using automated equipment to compare the signatures on mail ballots to what's on file. And again, that is also forward-looking because it wouldn't affect any ballots that were already screened. So there are only two states right now, Lester, in which there's active litigation.
And Professor Foley, in any of those cases, would you see a potential major change in the vote totals as we will have known them?
No, I don't see that. It doesn't seem to me that the litigation really is likely to affect the outcome in either of those states.
And so what are the, Hallie raised the issue of there doesn't seem to be a clear-cut legal strategy for the Trump campaign in terms of the nature of the kind of lawsuits. Do they feel scattershot? Is it important that they come up with a kind of a broader strategy?
Yeah, I think in this kind of litigation involving recounts or fights over the counting of votes, you often see litigation filed even if it doesn't have merit, because the candidate that's behind needs to do something, otherwise they're going to stay behind. But often these lawsuits just end up just going away because they lack merit.
All right, Professor Foley and Pete, thank you very much. And Chuck, you had something you want to add?
Well, what I have is a perfect example as to why the Biden folks have so much confidence, why we believe when all the votes are counted, Joe Biden's lead continues to expand in Pennsylvania. I want to point out, we just got some numbers out of Crawford County. Crawford County in the Erie, Pennsylvania media market, county just below here. You can see Donald Trump. It's a good, strong performance for him, 68%. We just got 4,400 vote by mail ballots in here. Joe Biden won 61% of the 4,000 mail-in ballots we just added into here. And Donald Trump won about 37% of them. The point is that we were telling you, all the vote by mail, it didn't matter where vote by mail came from, if it came from a red county or it all leaned heavily Joe Biden. So here is a county where he will overall barely top 30% of the vote. And yet, just now, when he won this most recent one, all of the vote by mail. I mean, we just basically had Republicans voted in person, Democrats voted by mail.
So at the end of the
just a perfect example of why all of this vote did this sort of. This is a case, the red mirage, and then.
Right. So at the end of the day, did the Trump campaign do itself a disservice by talking down early voting? I mean,
well, no, because their turnout came out. They're gonna get more people to vote in Pennsylvania this time than they did 4 years ago. No, what I would say is we did a disservice to the American people because we're sitting here, and I think Trump supporters sit there and say, and I've heard from them, I've heard from some acquaintances in Pennsylvania who are Trump supporters who sit there and say, the Democrats are stealing this. And I said, no, this is how it works. The law stated they couldn't start counting the vote by mail until election day itself. So I'm really sorry that the Republican legislature here and the Democratic administration in Pennsylvania could not figure out how to do this the way the state of Florida does it, the way the state of North Carolina does it, the way plenty of other, the state of Texas does it, because this has created this illusion of whatever it is, the blue fade or the red mirage or whatever sort of ridiculous red-blue term you want to use for this. These votes count the same whether they were cast in person or cast in the mail, and unfortunately, the way the vote counting process, the way the state of Pennsylvania was forced to do this, it has created this. So that's the part of this, frankly, if you're asking me, I mean, there's no difference. The president did a great turnout. Joe Biden did a good turnout. I think we're going to find out he could have done better over here in turnout in some of the Democratic strongholds, but he did good enough. But that's what we're seeing here anyway. It's just an explanation of why the vote by mail, it didn't matter if it came from a solid red county. The vote by mail has been Biden heavy.
And at the risk of stating the obvious, let's just remember we're in a pandemic, right? So people voted by mail who were concerned about going in person and being exposed to the coronavirus.
I stood in a line for 3 hours long and really worried about that distance.
Or they voted early. And that group of people tended, unfortunately, masks became politicized. Yeah. The pandemic became politicized. So people who voted early, even in red Pennsylvania, tended to be people that were concerned and mask wearing, and those tended to skew Democrat.
And we saw in the polling, I just discussed with John Ralston, basically it was mostly Democratic voters who picked containing the virus, and it was mostly Republican voters. I mean, in that sense, the president successfully, you could say his message was successful, at least for the people that supported him, did seem to align with him on what balance to strike between the virus and the economy. By the way, what does this mean overall? So here in a red county, right, if you're the Trump campaign and you think, oh, good, and Biden's lead grew, right? Like at the end of the day, his lead is now over 13,000, thanks to Crawford County, a county that Donald Trump won with 68%.
All right, we need to go back to the White House and Hallie Jackson. I understand we're getting some communication from the president.
We are. A new statement from President Trump, Lester, is on past by the campaign. I'm going to read it to you in full, so forgive me as I look on the phone. I'm not sure if we'd have time to make a graphic yet. This is literally just coming into us, but it's from President Trump, and he says the following, quote, he says, "We believe the American people deserve to have full transparency into all vote counting and election certification, and that this is no longer about any single election. The president continues that this is about the integrity of our entire election process," and I'm quoting here. He says, "From the beginning, we have said that all legal ballots must be counted and all illegal ballots should not be counted, yet we've met resistance for this basic principle by Democrats at every turn." The president wraps up his statement by saying, "We will pursue this process through every aspect of the law to guarantee the American people have confidence in our government," saying, "I will never give up fighting for you and our nation." And again, that is the statement that is just coming into us from President Trump as we are seeing this race in Pennsylvania, watching those numbers obviously give Joe Biden a lead. NBC News has not called that race. A couple of things here based on this statement. Number one, that the president indicates that he's going to continue to pursue this process through every aspect of the law. That backs up to me on the record what we have been reporting now for the last several hours, which is that the president will continue to fight and that their legal strategy, their strategy overall now runs through the courts as far as the president's path to push forward. I have to note, too, while the president says that this is about the integrity of our entire election process, it bears repeating. There is no evidence of widespread fraud in this election. There are no reports of widespread fraud. There are no reports of any systemic issues with the election process as it has been conducted. This election has proceeded as expected, with a lot of ballots taking a long time to count, partly because there were so many mail-in ballots because of course, the pandemic that Kate just referenced. This is proceeding as expected. What is notable about this statement, you can't see it, it is, in sentence format, in the punctuation is there, and I say that because the last statement we heard from the president yesterday was, you know this, Chuck, it was about 2 sentences, all caps. It felt very much like it was the president's voice. It was very characteristic of what we've seen from the president on Twitter and elsewhere. I am just telling you, based on 5 years covering this president, this statement is somewhat out of character from the president and the statements that we have seen him make, on air and on Twitter, particularly as it relates to this election process.
Yeah.
I have to say that there are Republicans, Lester, who are saying, Mitt Romney, for example, is out with a statement basically saying, listen, go to court, right? If you take the legal, do the legal things that you think you need to do if it is sort of confined to the bounds of the law and what is allowable, if you want to continue to fight that. What the concern is, and what Senator Romney and others are saying now, some in the Republican circles, is don't spread widespread, baseless, incorrect, false, inaccurate claims of voter fraud, because that is actually what's undermining the integrity of this election.
Yeah, I'm reading it here. It's carefully worded, and it doesn't make any specific allegations. It just gives you the sense that something is wrong. And if I read this in a vacuum, I'd say this is someone trying to make an appeal for election reform,
or someone preparing to accept something that's inevitable. I mean, look, Hallie, this does not sound like the Donald Trump of just 6 hours ago. How about that?
Because there's no specific.
There's no specific, and he doesn't seem to be alleging anything here. It's careful. Now, look, there should be two motivations here. If he wants to find more fellow Republicans to have his back, he needs to not say as many outlandish wrong things. A statement like this is something that a Pat Toomey can get. There's nothing in here that Pat Toomey could object to. There's nothing in here that Mitt Romney could object to. There's nothing in here that Mitch McConnell could object to.
There's almost nothing in there that Democrats could object to, because he's saying count all the legally cast votes, which I think every single American would support.
That's right. And it's interesting. It means somebody got him to sign off on this, which is which one might argue is the beginning. You want to talk about the different steps of acceptance there. That might be where we're in a step of acceptance.
We want to bring into this conversation NBC News political analyst and conservative host, The Hugh Hewitt Show on the Salem Radio Network, Hugh Hewitt, and former press secretary to President Obama, NBC News political analyst Robert Gibbs. Hugh, first, join this conversation, if you will. I don't know if you heard the entire statement from the president, but it does not make specific allegations of election fraud like some of what we heard from the president earlier, and reads more as an aspiration for a better election system. What's your read? Is the president now preparing for a graceful way to exit some of his allegations?
I don't know. Allegations are not evidence, and evidence is not a verdict. And I think he realizes, as most of his supporters realize, you've got to actually have a narrative and an allegation backed up by evidence to move forward in the court. I have been going back and consulting, oddly enough, with a couple of Nixon historians about President Nixon's decision in 1960 not to contest the election. He made that decision, they tell me, after he reached the conclusion that to go further with a recall, it had begun, or a recount in Illinois, that it would injure his future more than it would help it. And he thought, I'm going to live to fight another day. If the president is looking forward, as some people have already talked about, to 2024, if he's worried about his family's future political fortunes, that may be figuring into the dialing back of the rhetoric. There's also the reality. He needs there are 4 battlegrounds. He needs 3 wins. Before you get to 3, you got to get to 1. There is a recount underway in Georgia, which will matter quite a lot. He's done a lot for the Republican Party in this election. He got 70 million votes. He's won big gains, or he's led to wins in the House, probably in the Senate, in the state legislatures. He got a governorship. Right now, the party is very happy with him. And so I think there is a balancing act going on. What helps the president and the party that he leads the most? If you can get 1 win somewhere, full back to full mode, like Chuck was saying. I applaud, though, the way you've read it is exactly how I heard it, and how 70 million Trump voters heard it. That's not unreasonable. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, and Robert, does this pave the way? Do you see a conversation between Joe Biden and President Trump before this day is over?
We may very well be heading toward that, Lester. I think as you see Pennsylvania getting farther and farther away from President Trump and closer to a president-elect Joe Biden, I think that's certainly in the offing. And I agree with both what Chuck and Hugh have said here. I think for Chuck saying this is about making sure that the Republican Party is surrounding you and not walking away from your statements. And I agree with Hugh that this may be about preserving your standing for another day. And I think it's an interesting development. I think it will be interesting more so to compare it if we see President Trump today. Do we hear the audibilization of a written statement, which is easier to deliver something like this in a written form, than if we see him on camera? Is he back to what we saw last night and everyone cut away from? Or does he maintain where he is in this statement?
Do you sense that there's this consternation in the White House right now over this very issue of how to communicate, how to express, worry about the election without burning down the House?
I would certainly think so, because I think you're preserving you're preserving two things, right? You are preserving for the president his reputation and his future standing. And as you said, there's no reason Republicans wouldn't be very happy with what happened broadly on election night just a few nights ago. But I think also, somebody clearly has talked to him about what the country is in need of and what the office of president is in need of. And those are really important things for the continuation of our democracy in our country.
And Hugh, this is a president who never apologizes and never backs down. And to his supporters, that's the root of his strength. In this circumstances, what will his final message be if he confronts a loss? What would you expect to hear from him? Would it be something that we would normally think of as a concession, or will he find another way?
I think he'll find another way, Lester. Making America great again can be a part of many different messages. If he decides to exit because he can't get one win somewhere, which would lead to the second win to the third, I expect him to say what Richard Nixon said in 1960, and they were friends, by the way. They were good friends. They saw each other around New York, and if Nixon were alive, he'd say to him, find a defensible line, retreat to it, and save up your powder, and glory in making the Republican Party a majority in the Senate, which I think is likely to happen. Push on with every recount, demand that recounts be fair and full, but avoid giving in to the 10%. There's a bell curve in everything. There's a bell curve in the people who voted for Donald Trump as well. The 10%, the farthest, a hardcore right wing, want him to go to the state legislatures and have them overrule the popular vote. That's crazy. That's as radical as court packing. And the Republican Party is not a radical party. It's a party of the rule of law. So I think if he wants to play to the middle of his bell curve within the Republican Party, he finds a way to say, we are going to retreat to defensible lines and continue to make America great again through the Senate and through the House. And I'll be seeing you on the campaign trail at my rallies for the next 10 years.
All right. Hugh?
10.
Lester.
Grover Cleveland.
Just a data point for you. I've been watching both the official President Trump Twitter page and Donald J. Trump's Twitter page. Neither of them have provided this statement that we've been showing. So in other words, the president has not tweeted the statement that we're reading that's attributed to him. He has not owned that on his Twitter page.
Maybe his phone's charging.
Maybe he's busy. An hour ago, he was still talking about missing military ballots in Georgia.
And I'll just briefly read it again if you're just joining us and help you understand the conversation. Statement from the president a short while ago. He says, we believe the American people deserve to have full transparency into all vote counting and election certification, and that this is no longer about any single election. This is about the integrity of the entire election process. From the beginning, we've said that all legal ballots must be counted and all illegal ballots should not be counted. Yet we have met resistance to this basic principle by Democrats at every turn. We will pursue this process through every aspect of the law to guarantee that the American people have confidence in our government. I will never give up fighting for you and our nation. President Donald J. Trump. So that, you could read a number of ways, certainly as a potential graceful off-ramp to some of the more inflammatory statements and preparing, for what comes next. So we will reset here. Our special Decision 2020 coverage continues. We want to take a quick look at where we stand at this moment. We're closely watching 4 key states that have yet to be called, but where Joe Biden is holding a narrow lead as vote counting continues. Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. Joe Biden currently has 253 electoral votes based on the races that we have called. So a win in Pennsylvania alone, with its 20 electoral votes, would put him over the required 270 and make him president-elect. Donald Trump, with 214 electoral votes, has a much more difficult path, as you've been hearing. He cannot win without Pennsylvania, even if he manages to win all 3 of those other states. So he's got a very narrow working space right now. I want to go to Kristen Welker. She is at Joe Biden headquarters in Wilmington, Delaware. You've been noting that they are feeling very good, very optimistic, but this is not a done deal yet, Kristen.
This is not a done deal, Lester. You're absolutely right. And I heard you talking about the possibility of a concession call. I can tell you, based on my conversations, Vice President Joe Biden's not going to wait for that before addressing the nation if there is, in fact, an official call in this race. Now, we have been told that he is watching these returns. He's feeling quite confident, and we heard that in his remarks yesterday. When he spoke for about 2 minutes. He reiterated he wants to see every vote counted, but he was quite bullish. He said he believes once that happens, he and Senator Harris will prevail in this race. Now, if and when we do hear from Vice President Biden, we're told that we'll also hear from Senator Harris. What will their tone be? Well, according to one advisor, he is going to talk about healing, unity, and coming together as a nation. Really the themes that have governed his entire campaign. But it's also significant because what we are seeing play out is such a sharply divided nation. The margins, as we've talked about over and over again, have just been so close in each of these key battleground states. And so he knows that if he is, in fact, the person who winds up winning this race, that is going to be his first and arguably one of his toughest challenges, to try to bring this country together. And he talked about that. He said, look, I'm not naive. I know that it's an uphill battle, but it is something that needs to be tackled. In terms of the rhetoric that we're hearing from President Trump, that official statement went out. I think Kate's right. Let's see what he has to say on Twitter. But the Biden campaign, and I'll just remind everyone, has been quite defiant, releasing a statement saying, as we said on July 19th, the American people will decide this election, and the United States government is perfectly capable of escorting trespassers out of the White House. Lester.
All right. Thank you, Kristen Welker, for that. Peter Alexander is at the White House, and we got the statement from the president just a short time ago. Peter, what can you tell us?
Yeah, Lester, that's right. You know, it's notable as you saw that statement from the president today, just how different it was from what we heard from him publicly yesterday in the briefing room, where he was making those false claims without evidence of widespread voter fraud, claims that even members of his own party pushed back on yesterday, calling them inflammatory and dangerous. And then this new statement from the president that really doesn't sound a lot like his voice, very different, saying this is a much bigger issue, an issue of transparency, an issue not about any single election, about our election system at large, saying that he would continue this fight to the very end for you, as he describes, and for the American people at large. You know, one thing I'm struck by as we continue to have these conversations right now is, for the moment, of course, President Trump is the president. 75 more days until the inauguration. Whether or not he wins, that remains to be seen. But in conversations I've had with some White House officials in recent days, as they anticipated this could be a protracted process, they said they were advising the president that they wanted him to be more public, that he should be more public, demonstrating his responsibilities in the role, that he was still working on behalf of the American people. But to be totally clear, there has not been one public item on his schedule since his remarks late election night. So now, for approaching 3 full days, the best of our knowledge, it's been mostly waiting, watching television, and fuming in a series of tweets and other ways. Compare that to Joe Biden right now, who, as we reported just yesterday, had a coronavirus briefing before he made his public statements. Here, to the best of our knowledge, the president hasn't had a formal briefing of that kind in a significant period of time, even as the coronavirus pandemic grows in terms of the number of infections, hospitalizations, and deaths. So it does raise real questions as we talk about what the president will do in terms of the possibility of a concession. And aides tell me that that conversation hasn't taken place. They think it is way premature, as they still continue with the public message of, we're going to be defiant, we're going to fight this to the very end. Is what happens in terms of the governance of the country, what plans the president has, how he will sort of deal with those responsibilities at the very same time. Lester?
All right, good questions. All right, Peter Alexander, thank you. I want to go back to Justice Correspondent Pete Williams. We were chatting about lawsuits in Pennsylvania. You've got some new information.
Right, there's been now a ruling from an intermediate appellate court in Pennsylvania on this question about whether voters can come in and cast a provisional ballot to fix a problem with their mail ballots. Now, the state court has just said to the Secretary of State, you must order all local election officials to set aside any provisional ballots that were filed this way, any provisional ballots that were cast by mail-in voters who were given a chance to cast a provisional ballot to fix some problem with their mail-in votes. So from now on, the Secretary of State is ordered to tell the election officials they have to set any provisional ballots aside and not count them yet until the court decides whether there is a legal right to count those ballots. As I said earlier, Lester, this is the issue. The Republicans say there's no provision in state law that allows a voter to fix their ballot that way, to repair any problems in it. The Democrats say, well, the law isn't explicit. It doesn't explicitly say we can, but it doesn't explicitly say we can't. And so we think that this is consistent with letting people vote freely and fairly. So that's the question. Now, it does seem to me, Lester, that this is only going to apply from now on, because undoubtedly many counties in the state have already accepted these provisional ballots and put them into the pool of ballots that were cast, and it would be impossible now to go back and say, oops, we shouldn't have counted that ballot there. Once the ballot is separated from the envelope, you don't know who cast it, you don't know what it is, it goes into the pool. So it seems to me this is going to be forward-looking only change, that from now on they have to set any provisional ballots like that aside until the court decides whether they can be counted. And how many ballots that is, I have no clue. There's nothing in any of the court documents that would indicate what the universe of these ballots is.
All right, Pete, thanks for that update. Appreciate it. Rahema Ellis is watching the ongoing vote count in the all-important city of Philadelphia. We got an update from there about an hour or so ago. What have you learned, Rahema?
One of the things we're learning, Lester, is that they're talking about 40,000 mail ballots is what there remain to be counted here. The big question that I had for the election commissions here was how many of those mail-in ballots came in after the 8 o'clock cutoff time of Election Day, and how many were done before that. I didn't get an answer to that, so we're going to continue to pursue that because that could be significant in all of this. The courts had said that they have up until 5 o'clock today to receive those mail-in ballots, which they have set aside. Again, the question is, how many are they? Lester? All right,
Rahema Ellis in Philadelphia for us. Thanks very much. We can continue to watch all this play out. Chuck, why don't you give us one more look at the boards?
Well, look, and I'm going to do it in not dip in anything. Look, we're obviously getting pockets of mail-in ballots all day long, whatever there is from counties. And as we pointed out to you, even the red counties are coming up in Joe Biden's favor. His lead in Pennsylvania expanded just in the last hour. We are waiting for another pocket of votes out of Clark County. We expect that at 7 p.m. Eastern. It will go a long way in helping us characterize this race, perhaps for the final time in Nevada, with Joe Biden leading. It is over 90% chance that he's carrying Nevada. We're not yet at 99.5. Less clear as to the situation in Arizona, but I can tell you that so far what the president's got out of Maricopa in that first round of votes that we've seen today was not enough to overtake Joe Biden's lead. But there is some question about how many remaining ballots there are. Is there about 150,000 ballots, or is it closer to 226? That would tell you whether the president needs to win, a big majority. But those are the three places we expect to see some votes today.
Which means we're not going home. Chuck, thanks very much. Kate as well. We are going to return you now to regular programming. We will stay right here, standing by, monitoring all those very close uncalled states. We'll come back on the air immediately when there are further developments to bring you. Until then, I'm Lester Holt, NBC News. Stay close, everyone.